Right. A little bit. Welcome. Oh, g'day, Marlene. How are you? How's things? Yeah, good. Cool. It's very un-Queensland at the moment. All right. You guys are good for sound and everything back there. Mark Bailey, Minister for Transport, Main Roads. Well, give me a wave when you're good to go. Yeah, you're good. You're good? Okay, fantastic. Look, great to be here today to launch our action plan in terms of e-scooters. E-scooters have been incredibly popular here in Queensland. I think partly it's the climate. It's terrific to be able to take an e-scooter and have the bit of a breeze on a hot summer morning on the way to work. And so we see the numbers much higher in terms of usage here than southern states. But of course that means we've got to get the balance right in terms of safety. And so we've been working with the e-scooter community as well as the disability network, cyclists, pedestrian network and police around what is the template for making sure we've got the best regulation to make sure that we allow this new form of transport in a way that's effective, but is a way that's safe for other users as well. Because we've seen, unfortunately, like on our roadways, that there's a few cowboys out there as well who are willing to put other people's safety at risk, and that's just not acceptable. We want to see safe, active transport right across this city, just like we want to see safe roads as well. So this plan is all about that. Last year we had a round table at the end of the year where we got all the different parties together for a full half-day workshop. We went through every single angle of this, and we've come out with a number of different things. And the action plan today is about putting a lot of those in play. There's a few more things to come that are a little more complex that we'll continue to work on, particularly around definitions. But a couple of the really positive things are that we'll be instituting warning devices. So you've got to have a bell on your e-scooter, just like you do on a bicycle. That means that if there's something coming up ahead that's a bit of a blockage, you've got to let people know that you're coming. And I think that's a simple safety measure that I think everyone would think is reasonable. With speeds, we know that the 25 km/h speed limit is the template across the country for shared pathways, veloways, cycleways, but on footpaths it's just too high. So we're halving that down to 12 km/h on most footpaths, so we'll get that balance right between people feeling safe, walking on footpaths, getting around in their normal daily business without people zizzing by at really high speeds on an e-scooter. So I think that's a better balance in terms of particularly the inner city areas, that you can still ride your e-scooter on a footpath, but you've got to do it reasonably with respect for other people, just like bicycle riders need to do exactly the same. We'll also be, we've had a couple of meetings now in terms of a parking working group. Where e-scooters are parked is actually a big issue, and I see this all the time when I go for a run or go for a cycle. It's gotten better. The companies have certainly been acting on this, and I see increasingly e-scooters parked in safe, out-of-the-way places, but there's still too many instances of where you come around a corner and there's an e-scooter parked right across your pathway, and it's just not safe. Now, that's inconvenient, but it's also a danger and a difficulty for people, for instance, with disabilities, who, if their pathway is blocked, will sometimes have to go around the whole block to just get around a blockage. And that's not fair. It's just not fair for people who've got disabilities, and particularly people with visual disabilities, when they just don't know what's in their pathway. So we want to continue to make sure that the parking is improved. We're pretty regulated on just about everything else on the footpaths, street furniture, street lighting, trees, that sort of thing. I'm sure we can have a simple, easy to implement, agreed position across local governments about how e-scooters are parked, that everyone understands that's low cost and that's just sensible. So I want to thank Local Government Association of Queensland, councils like Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, Brisbane, who are working with us on that, because it's just a matter of collaborating to come up with the right plan there. Look, in terms of enforcement, and I acknowledge the Queensland Police Service are here today and thank them for all of their work in terms of enforcing provisions. What we do see is, while most e-scooter riders are doing the right thing in terms of speed, we still see some private scooters out there doing well over 25 km/h. I've seen it myself. They might be doing 45, 50 even, and that's the equivalent of someone driving a car at 150, because it's not what is safe for other road users. So we want to crack down on that, and I know police don't want to see that sort of behaviour. So if you're one of these people doing those sorts of things and think you're going below the radar, well, it's just a matter of time before you get caught. And if your device is non-compliant, we're looking at provisions there as well. And there will be increased penalties for people who are doing excessive speeds on an e-scooter, because if you hit a pedestrian at 45 kilometres an hour, it is a very dire situation, and that's not what we want to see. Two closing points, and I'll hand over to a representative from our disability network here and police to say a few comments. But we're making signage a lot more straightforward and direct. So I know we've been out on our veloways, and other councils have been out putting markings about where e-scooters are allowed and not allowed, literally on the pathway, so that as you get around, you can just see it. You can see what's allowed and what's not allowed. I think that's much more user-friendly. And but we also need to see more infrastructure for active transport, so that people who use e-scooters as well as cycles and other devices can get around safely, where possible separated from traffic. We've got a big program from a state government point of view on that, and I thank the councils, particularly Sunshine Coast and Gold Coast, who are investing heavily in active transport. We need more active transport infrastructure. We don't need to see cuts in that area, which unfortunately we've seen a few of lately. I'll just hand over.
Hi, I'm Paige Armstrong, and I'm with Queenslanders with Disability Network. We're a peak body representing people with diverse disabilities across Queensland. We're out in this rather cold and chilly morning, because we are so pleased to see that Queensland has implemented a clear plan to ensure that we get better safety for people with disability, whilst still supporting people who want to use scooters or motorised scooters as a method of transportation. Whilst we understand that this is a wave of transport going forward, especially as we move towards the future Olympic and Paralympic Games in 2032, our members have been raising with us issues that they've been challenged by, with scooters that are left lying around on footpaths, on areas of road, people with vision impairment, as the Minister raised, people who are mobility impaired, people who have been challenged, people with disability who have been challenged in walking along footpaths when they have had scooters coming up at 25 kilometres or actually more an hour, and people being knocked, etc. So the range of measures that have been announced today will go a long way to addressing some of those issues, those key issues that we've raised, issues about speed especially on footpaths, issues to do with devices on scooters to make sure that people are aware, like the bells, etc., that have been introduced. And importantly, we're looking forward to discussions around parking. Most importantly to us, we think it's great that Queensland has led the way. I think that Queensland may be one of the first states to introduce such a comprehensive plan. And it's good to see that it's a plan that's been introduced in a collective way with all the different stakeholders. We have been working with state agencies like Queensland Police, but also with the varying companies that both hire and sell these devices, so that collectively, along with government, we can come up with solutions that work for everyone going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Acting Sergeant Duncan Hill, Brisbane City Road Policing. We've been trying to just ensure that we continue to have a safe road network for all road users, whether they be pedestrians, cars, cyclists or PMD users. And in that regard, we've been providing our observations to Transport and Main Roads and the Minister's Working Group to try and ensure or increase safety for riders and for the pedestrians. We really have a couple of really simple messages. We just want people to wear a helmet. We want them to ride to the conditions. So if there's pedestrians around, slow down. If there's you're riding through busy areas or on roads, ride to the left, give way to other people on the roads and on the footpaths. Last thing is, and it's becoming more and more of an issue for us, is riding them while intoxicated. We're having more incidents within our city precincts where people are driving or riding the PMDs while intoxicated, and this is causing a problem for them and our hospitals. So we ask that if you are drinking, just like driving, you don't ride. Just on a last note, as you'll see from where we are today, we still have an unfortunately low level of compliance with some people. And in that regard, we'll be going out over the next coming weeks and months to do enforcement operations to educate and enforce these new rules and to ensure that they are embedded as quickly as possible to ensure that everyone does remain safe. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Duncan. Thank you. Any questions?
This should be very similar to what you announced in February. You're now saying they now come into effect from a certain date.
Yeah, so Tony, we'll see the provisions, for instance, around bells coming in from November 1. So there's a date for people that's been announced. So yeah, it's and we'll continue to work on a few things, but we've made some really good progress in terms of parking. I think while things are improving, we certainly need a simple scheme that becomes the template for local governments right across the state, because we're starting to see them in Cairns and different places. And if we've got an agreed position with local government that can be implemented, it becomes simple. If you're using e-scooter here or you go on holidays in Cairns, you know exactly where to park it, and it's keep it out of the way of everybody else.
So legislation goes to state parliament soon too.
Yeah, if there's any changes that are required, we're happy to do that, but we're still working through some of those definitional issues at the moment. For instance, an e-scooter is defined as a pedestrian, and there's practical reasons for that, but then there's a few enforcement sort of difficulties. So we're working closely with police just to get the balance right, because we want to be able to enforce, for instance, drink riding as well as we possibly can. At the moment we can do that on roadways very well, but on footpaths not so much. So we've just got to get that balance right.
So the new factors are from November 1 after it's
Correct. Yep. Yes, that's right.
and with tougher penalties, because it will be able to increase the penalties for speeding. So
Yeah.
do you expect that to be in place by the first?
Yeah, look, we expect to have that in place by the end of the year. We're working with police, but we want to get those definitional issues settled before we have those penalties announced. But look, I think people need to understand these are coming. So if you're doing the wrong thing, sort it out now and you'll be fine, because most people are doing the right thing, but there's some people out there really not taking into account or respecting other people. Look, we don't have a fine figure at the moment, but I think when you see that we've been very serious about the fines, for instance, for mobile phone distraction, not wearing a seatbelt, we haven't been afraid to bring in a solid penalty as a deterrent. The safety of everybody as they move around our state is our first priority, and we will have an appropriate penalty. If you're doing 45 or 50k on an e-scooter, you quite frankly deserve to have the book thrown at you, and we'll be coming out with a final decision on that as we work through some of the definitional issues. We're looking at that with police, so we'll have more on that once we work through the definitional issues.
Will we ever see scooters on low-speed roads?
Sorry, say that again.
Will we ever see scooters on low-speed roads that might keep you off the
Oh, well, look, at the moment you can use e-scooters legally on ordinary suburban streets that don't have white line down the middle. So you can actually use them on a lot of our roadways that are the quieter streets, but where you get a lot more volumes of traffic and where there are white line markings down the middle, then you aren't allowed on that. So we know that these devices, they're generally slower than a bicycle, and they're less manoeuvrable than a bicycle. So if you're in a heavy traffic situation, then we are very cautious about letting lots of people be in that situation, even though they might want to do that. It may not be the safe thing for them and for other users of our roads. Yep. Look, I don't believe so, and look, I won't make too many comments on it. The budget comes down later this month. That's a matter for the Treasurer. But look, resources companies are, I think they've got to remember that what they're digging up is actually owned by the people of Queensland. And at the moment, there are huge profits being made in the resources sector. In a situation with full employment, I mean, we've got the lowest unemployment level 25, 30 years. So, you know, it's a matter for the budget. But remember, these resources are owned by Queenslanders, not by private companies, and it's appropriate, potentially, that Queenslanders and their public services do get some benefit if there's been, you know, if there is indeed large profits being made.
Why don't you believe it will be breaking the law?
Sorry, a little louder,
The
Mum.
government at the time had said no new increased taxes.
Oh, well, you're asking me a hypothetical there, and look, all the detail will be in the budget. I endorse the previous comments by the Treasurer. We are very committed to keeping our election promises, but look, you know, that's a matter for budget deliberations.
Have you had a chance to chat to Catherine King since the federal election, and all of those discussions might lead to changes in the state budget and infrastructure projects?
Yeah, look, Catherine King has had a very good relationship with Queensland from the day she began, and that's a lot better than I can say for Barnaby Joyce, who is the Transport Minister on 2 different terms, and I couldn't get a single meeting with him either one. So it shows how much disrespect for Queensland under the previous government. I've had many meetings with Catherine King. She's interested in Queensland, and I look forward to a productive and a positive relationship with a federal government that is genuinely interested in Queensland and our infrastructure needs. We will need to look at our budget in context of there will be a federal budget later this year. So we will need to just look at those issues in terms of what we consider in terms of our budget and whether we need to then do further updates obviously later in the year. But I look forward to the new Albanese Labor government delivering on their election commitments for Queensland and look forward to working with them.
Flag any particular projects, such as Coast Rail Network up to Woodstool, projects like that, flagged something?
Yeah, look, you know, we saw no movement on the Sunshine Coast Rail situation there under the previous government, and then there was a last-minute sort of attempt at trying to cobble something together, which, you know, they couldn't even get the story straight. It was a bit embarrassing. But look, what we want to avoid in Queensland, and what we've had a trouble with for a long time, is having a genuine relationship and dialogue with the federal government. Cross River Rail has been overdue, and we couldn't get a single dollar out of either the Turnbull, Morrison or Abbott governments. We had to fund 100% of a massive project ourselves, and you compare that to other states, it's just you know, it's very much a contradiction. But that project is setting us up for the growth that we've got, and also the games coming with the Olympics and Paralympics, because we bit the bullet, but we shouldn't have had to. We should have had a partnership with the federal government, and they just weren't interested. So we want to be able to avoid that sort of situation going forward. And I acknowledge the incredible record of the current Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, as an infrastructure minister. You know, Gold Coast Light Rail was something that he drove as a Transport Minister because it was the right policy outcome. You know, federal Labor does not hold, and probably will never hold, a federal seat on the Gold Coast, but it was the right transport solution for the 6th largest city in this country with massive growth coming. So, you know, that kind of foresight and understanding of the economy and of infrastructure by the current Prime Minister, and you look at his record, is heartening, and it's something we're keen to work with him on.
By the same token, the Labor government was years behind that Sunshine Coast Rail Network. Do you think we can finally get that rail network out towards Woodstool?
Yeah, look, we've made substantial commitments there, and you know, we came into power and there wasn't even a business case for the Sunshine Rail duplication done by the Newman government. It would have cost them a couple of million, and they didn't even do that. So we actually had to do all the prep work and the planning work. We've now got more than $500 million going into the Sunshine Rail duplication project, with early works almost done and heavy works due in the future. We're very happy about that, but we'll need to work through with the federal government on the infrastructure needs and the venue selection around the ones that are remaining for the Olympic and Paralympic Games. That's going to be a high priority over the next 12 months. And once some of those decisions then are made, other projects, you know, and how they'll be funded will flow from that. So more than 80% of the venues are decided for the Olympic and Paralympic Games in the sense that they're already built, but there's a number that are not. So we'll need to go through the governance around that, and then other decisions will flow from that. I've said during the federal election campaign when we had these last-minute stunts from Ted O'Brien and Andrew Wallace on the Sunshine Coast, that they had a sudden last-minute interest in heavy rail there. Well, there's an appropriate process for working together between the federal and the state governments on the Olympics. I'm committed to that. That's not going to change. We'll do that methodically, and then we'll see what comes out of that.
Could I just ask you a couple of questions just about the...
Yeah, go for it.
Oh,
Yeah, Duncan, yeah, absolutely.
Just the crackdown, you said the next few weeks you're going to crack it down. What will you
Yes.
be doing? Like, can you find people now for speeding or not wearing helmets?
Yes, so the current rules at the moment still allow us to enforce and have penalties attached to them. In general, most of them are $137 at the moment. So starting from about next week, Monday week, the week after, we're going to be conducting operations within the Brisbane City area and West End, targeting the use of the devices on the way to work and the way from work, so at peak hour. We're finding that that's becoming a time of greater confluence and issues between riders of bikes, PMDs, and with pedestrians. So we're going to be targeting those areas. Following into that last of that week, we'll be then moving into our safe night precincts, targeting users in those areas, especially intoxication and speed. And then in the months that follow, we'll start moving to those regional areas where these scooters currently are. So the Gold Coast has the private personal mobility devices floating around. I understand Logan, Mackay, Townsville and Rockhampton and Hervey Bay currently have the hire scheme, similar to our Neurons and Beams we have in Brisbane. So within those areas, we'll be conducting operations to target those users as well. We have a range. We have a range of abilities and powers that we can use depending on the situation and the intoxication level. It has been known, and I've done it myself, where I've had to arrest people outright and take them to hospital to take blood or other means. So where the need arises, we have powers already to enable us to enforce those rules.
How dangerous must it be getting? You mentioned that inexpensive.
I don't have any empirical data to share. I can only share my observations. I work in Brisbane City, which includes the Fortitude Valley area and the Inner West Safe Night Precinct, being Caxton Street. With the popularity of the devices and the increasing amount of the hire devices, we're finding that people do go out and drink. We've already had a couple of initiatives come in where Beam and Neuron will turn off their devices and not have them available within Fortitude Valley and Brisbane City, and that's certainly had an impact and reduced some of that some of those offences that we're seeing. But unfortunately, until that 12 o'clock, we're still seeing way too many people riding them while intoxicated, and they're placing themselves, often their passenger, illegally at risk. They're not wearing helmets, and so we're just getting these 2 or 3 areas that leads to serious injury when they come off. Unfortunately, they fall off onto a road, they're then with cars, and they're not wearing protective equipment, so the injuries happen.
Thanks everyone. Cheers. Thank you.